ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ सहस्रशीर्षं देवं विश्वाक्षं विश्वशम्भुवं विश्वन्नारायणं देवमक्षरं परमं पदम् विश्वतः परमान् नित्यं विश्वन्नारायणगुं हरिं विश्वमेवेदं पुरुषस्तद्विश्वमुपजीवति पतिं विश्वस्यात्मेश्वरगुं शाश्वतगुं शिवमच्युतं नारायणं महाज्ञेयं विश्वात्मानं परायणम्. So we were looking at the Purusha Sukta. Normally when we chant Purusha Suktam, we continue with the Narayana Suktam also. So that's how traditionally we chant. So that's why even we are now continuing with the Narayana Sukta now. This Narayana Sukta itself, you can see here, it is part of Taittiriya Aranyakam, 10th chapter, 13th Anuvakar section, or 10th section, 13th chapter. However you want, you can read it. In fact, this Taittiriya Aranyaka has a lot of interesting mantras which we regularly use for chanting. So before this Narayana Suktam, the mantra which is there is Yo Vedado Swarah Prokto Vedante Cha Pratishtitaha Tasya Prakriti Linasya Yah Parassa Maheshwaraha. So this mantra also we chant a lot, and even this Nakarmana na prajaya dhane natyage naike amritatvama nashuhu parena na kannihitanguha yam vibhrajate tatyatayo vishanti Vedanta Vijnana Sunischitartha Sannyasa Yoga Dhyataya Shuddha Sattva Aha. So all this, in fact, this mantra's continuation only is Yo Vedado Swarah Prokto Vedante Cha Pratishtitaha Tasya Prakriti Linasya Yah Parassa Maheshwaraha. So this we actually chant whenever a sannyasi visits and we are giving a Purna Kumbha. We chant this mantra there. So this is also part of this Taittiriya Aranyakam. In fact, just the previous, in the previous Anuvaka, it ends like that. So Sayanacharya, when Sayanacharya is continuing the Bhashya, so he is saying that in the last mantra of the previous Anuvaka, so it says Yo Vedado Swarah Proktaha. So the Veda, whenever we chant Veda, we start with Om, correct? Om Agnimile Purohitai Yajnasya Deva Mrityujam Hota Aram Ratnadhatamam. That's how Rig Veda is starting. Our Yajurveda also we start Om Ishet Vorjetva Vayavastho Payavasta Devo Vassavita Prarpayatu Shreshtatamaya Karmane. So like this Rig Veda, Yajurveda, all the Vedas, in fact, we start with Om. So Yo Vedado Swarah Proktaha. So in the beginning of the Veda, whichever Swara was said, which is Omkara, the same thing is also Vedantecha Pratishtitaha. Pratishtitaha here means Pratipaditaha, that which is revealed by the Vedanta. So in the Vedanta also Omkara Upasana, Pranava Upasana is always talked about. You take Mundaka Upanishad or you take Mandukya Upanishad. So different Upanishads talk about the Omkara Upasana. They all reveal Omkara. And in fact, for Upasana purpose, the Omkara is looked upon as being, it is being constituted of Akara, Ukara, Makara. Okay. Now, one distortion or wrong way of writing and pronouncing Om is they all write it as AUM. That's not the idea. Okay, so you cannot write Om as AUM and start saying Aum and all that. That is not correct. That separation is only for upasana purpose. It is not for the purpose of writing or chanting or pronunciation. Om is Om only. Understand that. Omkara means Om only you have to chant. And normally Om we also say as a pluta. That means it is elongated. You have to chant it for 3 matras at least. Om means 3 matras you are chanting. So Om has to be chanted and written as Om only. The AUM is only that when you do Upasana, we look upon Omkara as being made up of these uh, three aksharas, you can say 3 alphabets, and then we can superimpose. Okay, the whole idea of any Upasana is to superimpose one thing on the other and visualize that. So if you have 3, means again you can look upon it as the waker, dreamer, and the one who is sleeping at the individual level. At the macro level, Akara is Virat, means the physical totality of the physical or Sthula Jagat, which is called Virat. Then Ukara is looked upon as a subtle totality, Sukshma, okay, Sukshma Jagat or Hiranyagarbha. And the means you have closed your mouth, correct? That is the only sound you can get. When you open your mouth, ah, without any other effort, anybody opens their mouth and makes a sound, it is ah, correct? And if you close your mouth, that's all you can do. You can maybe raise the frequency a little bit. And all the singers do normally to catch the shruti. Anyway, so all other sounds are in between, correct? Between a and only every other sound is there. That depends on what kind of antara prayatana, bahya prayatana and all you give, what kind of effort you give internally and also in your mouth, parts of the mouth. Internally means from your diaphragm onwards, how you send the air and all that. So, Om is a sound symbol of all the sounds, correct? And that is why it is fit to be a sound symbol for Ishvara also, because Ishvara is manifest as everything, and Omkara represents all sounds, because when we look at Omkara as A, U and it actually represents all the sounds which are possible to make. The Akara representing the first sound, representing the sound which you can make once everything else, once you have closed your mouth, that is the only sound, and everything in between is Ukara, depending on how you make the effort. So this Omkara is presented like this so that you can do this Upasana, and then it is revealed that there is a Chaturtham, there is a 4th Matra also is there, which is also silence and all people say, which is correct in one way. That is everything is Akara, Ukara, Makara, all that is revealed by with which consciousness, with Chaitanyam, that is free from these 3 sounds. And in fact, from that only all these sounds are also born, but which itself is free of all these sounds. And that is you, that is your Swarupa, correct? That is your very nature. You are that conscious being in whom this Akara, Ukara, Makara, whether at an individual level or at a macro level, everything is manifest from that Chaitanya only. So that is what is to be understood. The Upasana also leads you to understand your nature as the one who is free from all these manifestations. whether it is the waking world, dream world, or even the in the deep sleep, it is the karana or potential world, you can say. The other two are manifest. And you are free from all these three things. That is your nature. You are the one who is always revealing, to whom all these things are becoming evident all the time, and who is independent of all these things. So that is the teaching, and that has to understand that only this Omkara Upasana is given. And this Omkara itself is what? So that is, it was revealed in the beginning of the Veda, and it is revealed by the Upanishads also, by the Vedanta. And tasya prakriti linasya yaha parasa maheshwaraha. So this prakriti linaha means what? Prakriti is whatever we see. The karana of this entire world is called prakriti. The potential form of this world itself is prakriti, you can say. Prakriti is trigunatmika, we say. It is made up of three gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. And this prakriti leenam means what? Once this prakriti itself is resolved into which reality? Because prakriti itself is also known as maya. Why? Because it doesn't exist on its own. Understand that. Okay, so maya means, it is normally translated as illusion also, which is not really a correct translation. Maya means it is mithya, we say. Okay, maya, mithya, these are all the words we use to describe the world which we are encountering. Now, what is the meaning of this maya, mithya? Maya, mithya means it is not simply illusion. It means it is dependent reality. It doesn't have a reality of its own, but it appears. We do not deny the very perception of the world. Understand that. Advaita means two things you have to understand. Advaita means we are not saying Dvaita itself you are not perceiving. Since you are perceiving Dvaita only, we have to teach you Advaita. Correct? We are all seeing the Dvaitam, Dvaita Jagat, and we are also not contradicting perception or sense organs, whatever they are revealing. That is another thing they accuse us is what? If you interpret the Veda and say that Veda is only teaching Advaita, then uh, one objection to that is immediately they will say, but our sense organs are all reporting only Dvaitam. How can you then override Pratyaksha and say Veda is saying something else? Veda cannot contradict Pratyaksha. Even Bhashyakara Shankara also says that. Even in Bhagavad Gita Bhashya, he says, even if there are 100 Veda Vakyas, we cannot directly accept that fire is cold. We have to give some other interpretation. If Veda says fire is cold, it cannot contradict what the Pratyaksha Anubhava is, fire is hot. So either you have to discard it or you have to give a different meaning for that. So what we have to understand is Pratyaksha only reveals whatever you are seeing, but not the truth of that. Those are two different things. So really Veda is not contradicting your experience or Pratyaksha, the sense perception, whatever we are having. Sense perception is reporting the objective world to you, but not the reality of the object world. Do you understand the difference? It is only reporting to you the dharma, the qualities of the object you are perceiving, but not the dharmi, the one who is having the quality. What is the reality of the dharmi? The one who has the quality, whether the object, the substance itself is real or not. Pratyaksha has no access to that. Understand that. Sense organs do not reveal that. This thing, even every scientist also understands this, correct? Because the macro world as we see is so variegated, so many things are there. But when you try to analyze that, the biologist will say the entire macro world is made up of cells, okay, at least all the living beings. Then the chemist will say, no, no, it's all molecules. Then the atomic physicist will say it is all atoms. Then the quantum physicist will say it is all proton, neutron, electron, other subatomic particles. Like that, they keep on going. Now, if you have only a few subatomic particles, how does this world become all these different objects? How or why did it become means they have no answer for that. Understand that. That is what is Maya. So whatever you see in the macro world, for that doesn't mean we are negating what you are seeing in the macro world. We have to understand the boundary conditions correctly. Whatever is at the macro level is whatever reported by your sense organs. We accept that. But that doesn't mean it is the same at the micro level, correct? If you change your standpoint, drishti, then it is different. You can say at the quantum level, 99% is space, correct? That is the reality, because nucleus is very occupies very little space. Electron clouds are also are very distant comparatively. 99% is space at the atomic level, but that is not the reality at the macro level, correct? So by saying that, are we negating? No, correct? Whatever is true at the micro level or quantum level may not be the same thing at the macro level. That doesn't mean quantum physicists are actually contradicting Newtonian physics or whatever. Like that, when Veda is teaching you Advaita, it is not really contradicting whatever you are knowing through your sense organs, but it is teaching you something different. It is talking to you about the reality of your objective cognition. That's what you have to understand. And that reality is what? Whatever limitless objects you are seeing here, all of them are from the same reality. In fact, they don't have a reality of their own. That's why they are mithya. So this entire world is like a pot. Pot has no reality other than being the material of which it is born. If it is a golden pot, the pot is nothing but gold, correct? If you touch the pot, you are touching the gold. If you weigh the pot, you are weighing the gold. In fact, but a golden pot cannot exist without being gold. So the pot is gold, but in your understanding of gold, there is no partness. Is that clear? That is the difference between Satyam and Mithya. Satyam exists by itself. It is Swata Siddhaha, Swaprakashaha. Gold exists. Gold is, gold was, gold is, gold will be. Pot was not, pot is, pot will not be. And even when pot is, gold is really. That's why pot is Mithya. Is that clear? This Mithyatvam we have to understand. Pot is perceived. We are not denying that. But we are only saying pot doesn't have a reality of its own. Pot also has a use. There is function also is there. Name, form, function, everything is there for a pot, but it doesn't have any reality of its own because it exists only as gold if it is a golden pot. If it exists only as clay, if it is a clay pot. This Satyam and Mithya we have to understand. In Satyam Mithya, Mithya is Satyam really, correct? Actor is acting as a beggar. The beggar is really the actor, but the actor is not beggar. This is what you have to understand. Actor is in fact a millionaire. By acting as a beggar, the actor has become a millionaire, correct? So beggar is actor, actor is not beggar. B is A is not B. This is the inequality you have to understand for you to understand the Satyam Mithya properly. Now in the Omkara Upasana also, This akara, ukara, makara, everything is only mithya. They are all for you to understand. First, you even there you have to resolve the physical world and understand it as coming from only the subtle world. The subtle also resolves into the causal, and the causal form also is nothing but mithya only. Only you are there. That is the chaturtham, the fourth, which is silence. Also, we say. Okay, so that is you. That is your very nature. It's not separate from you. For that only that upasana is there, and that one is prakriti lina, like that it comes. That is Maheshwara only. That is the Swarupa of Maheshwara. Correct? So you have to do upasana, Omkara upasana, and understand your Swarupa is the same as Maheshwara Swarupa, Maheshwara, the great Lord. Like that, the previous Anuvaka ends. Now this is the continuation. So Sayanacharya is saying the Maheshwara who was revealed as the one who should be who is the upasya, correct? One who you should do the upasana on, because you are doing the Omkara upasana to understand the Swarupa of Maheshwara. He is the Dhyaya Vastu, the one on whom you are doing your upasana, your meditation, we can say. Now this Anuvaka, this 13th Anuvaka, which is called Narayana Sukta, is only talking about the same Maheshwaras, all more in more detail, the all the characteristics, you can say, of this Maheshwara as Narayana. Okay, so there is no difference between Ishvara and Narayana and all that. Is that clear? But there are sectarian people also who may not like this. But that's how the Sayanacharya, who wrote the Bhashyam for the Veda, he is giving an introduction to this particular Anuvaka, saying that whoever this Upasya Devata, Upasya or the Dhyaya Vastu, Maheshwara, who was talked about in the previous Anuvaka, the same Maheshwara's characteristics are given more in more detail in this chapter, so that you can do Upasana again easily. Dhyanam you can do by contemplating on all these characteristics which are going to be talked about here. And what is the first mantra here? Sahasrashirisham Devam Vishwaksham Vishwashambhuvam. Sahasrashirisham Devam. Sahasrashirisham again. So even the Purusha Sukta, if you remember, Sahasrashirsha Purushaha. Correct? It started as Sahasrashirsha Purushaha. Here also Sahasrashirsham Devam. So Sahasra means here what? Not literally 1,000. Understand that. Here Sahasra is only a Upalakshana. It is a figurative use. Means Ananta, Aparimita, limitless. That is the meaning. Sahasra here literally means limitless or all. All the heads are only the heads of Narayana here, because Narayana is the Deva we are talking about. So Narayana only is manifest as this entire Srishti. So that is the vision. The Vedic vision is again and again what you have to appreciate. Whatever is manifest here is nothing but the manifestation of one reality. Only one reality is there. But that alone is appearing as many different names and forms. Is that clear? So that is the main reality, main vision. The vision of the Veda is what? All that is here is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is both the maker and the material. Again and again the same vision. And when we say Bhagavan is manifest as everything here, it should not leave out your own body, your own mind. Everything also is Bhagavan only. Correct? So you have to accept even your individuality as a manifestation of Bhagavan. accept that, then you can accept yourself as you are. Unless you accept yourself as you are as an individual, relatively you will not have any peace of mind, because most of the individual problems are because again they are all one of self non acceptance only. Many people hate themselves as individuals. First you have to get rid of that hatred of yourself. In fact, if you hate yourself, you cannot love anybody else also. So you have to accept whatever whatever that you are and whatever that you are facing as manifestation of Ishvara. It is easier said than done, correct? But that is the vision. Again and again you get exposed to this vision, it will make a difference. Understand that. It may not, first time you hear the teaching of Vedanta, it may not make a big difference, but at least it will give you some insight. But the insight has to be repeated. Understand that. Any insight has to be repeated again and again for it to make a certain change, to bring about self transformation. So first you have to transform yourself as an individual, then you have to transform your individual identity itself. It's a complete transformation. You have to understand this individuality itself is mithya. It comes and goes. It's not your nature or it's your swarupa really. Who you think you are, that itself is wrong. That itself has to be analyzed and understood correctly. You give up the individuality and own up to your infinity, we have to say. Correct? That's the teaching. So all this is only for that, for you to understand that. So here Bhagavan is presented as Sahasra Shirisham Devam, the one who has all the heads and one who is Deva. Okay, one who is Deva means again Dyotanatmakat, we can take one who is effulgent, self-effulgent. So consciousness, we say, is self-existent and self-revealing or self-effulgent. Why? Because it doesn't require any means of knowledge to become evident. If I ask you, are you there? You have to say yes. How did you know you are there? Did you use any means of knowledge to know yourself? Means no. I don't have to use pratyaksha or anumana or any means of knowledge to know myself. That is why I am self-revealing, self-existent reality. So that Devam, also Vishwaksham, the one again here, one who has who is the eyes of all the beings. Vishwa Aksham. Vishwa Shambhuvam. Sham means Sukham. Okay, Sham Karoti, Shankaraha, Shambhu. All this is what means here. The entire world gets Sukha from this Narayana only, Bhagavan only. Because this Swarupa only is Matram Upajivanti and all Upanishads are also saying. See, this Atma Swarupa is the source of all Ananda. It is the source of all happiness. And whatever Vishaya Sukha in the worldly transactions, also we have some Sukha, correct? Everybody enjoys some Sukha. If everything is Dukkha, then nobody would want to even live. So worldly life is both Sukha and Dukkha. And when do you have Sukha? Means Sukha itself is analyzed a lot. If you read other granthas like Panchadashi or even Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also uh, has a big discussion, or Taittiriya Upanishad, there is Ananda Mimamsa itself is there. So what do you think is Ananda or Sukha? As an individual, you think I have to be well educated, because what enjoyment an educated cultured person can have is not the same enjoyment which an illiterate uncultured person has, correct? An illiterate uncultured person has only certain avenues of sukha. It can be a physical sukha. Of course, everybody can have physical sukha, you can have, no doubt. But then more refined rasa, let us say, enjoyment, taste, for that you require some education, some leisure also, the ability to enjoy refined things in life itself is a great privilege. Okay, for that you have to be educated also, knowledgeable, because you only see what you know. That is one more interesting thing, correct? But how do we then even learn new things? That itself is a great mystery. We have to teach you only through words you know, even the things you do not know. But then how do you even know new things by only learning through words which you know already? Think about that. So anyway, if you know more, then you can also enjoy more certain things. I'm saying, like classical music, let us say, anything classical requires a certain knowledge and refinement. So all that you can enjoy. You are educated. Ashishtaha, Upanishad says. Ashishto dradhishto balishtaha. Okay, you have all this refined taste, you have education, culture, but you are all the time sick. You are not even able to sit for 5 minutes. How will you enjoy then? Health is wealth and all we say, really. So dradhishtaha means healthy, strong. Also yuva, in fact it starts with yuva syat sadhu yuva dhyayakaha. You are no point being a very old person, correct? You are young, yuva, sadhu, you are good natured, good person, and you are ashishtaha, educated, cultured, dradhishtaha, having very good health, strong, balishtaha also strong. So healthy and strong and educated, cultured, everything. Okay, you have all these things, but you are all that, you are poor, barely you are surviving. All your time is going only in survival. Then what are you going to enjoy? No, no problem. Tasyayam prithivi sarva vittasya purna syat. With all these things, this person also has all the wealth in this prithvi, the earth. Whatever wealth is there in this entire prithvi, in this earth, is all yours. Okay, then what else can you ask as a human being? All this is there, Upanishad is saying. Then what? That is called Sayeko Manusha Anandaha. That now the Upanishad defines as one Manusha Ananda, one unit of Manusha Ananda. Okay, so that is the greatest thing you can achieve in this world. You have all the wealth resources of this earth. You are educated, you are healthy, you are strong, you are young. Okay, you are having a good nature. Mentally also you are good natured. You are, so with all this, whatever you can enjoy is one unit of ananda, which is manushya ananda. As a human being, whatever you can enjoy, te ye shatam manushyanandaha. Then it goes on and on like that. 100 times of this, whatever has been defined, is enjoyed by manushya gandharvas. Then deva gandharvas have 100 times of manushya gandharva. Like that, the Upanishad keeps on going. Ajanajanan Devan. Then Ajanajan Devaha. There one type of Devas called Ajanajan Devaha. They have 100 times of that also. Then Devas, then Indra, Brihaspati, like that keeps on going 100 times. But in all these things, the Upanishad also says, Shrotriyasya cha kamahatascha. Shrotriyasya akamahatasya cha. Shrotriyasya akamahataha means one who is not afflicted by desires and one who knows the vision of the Shastra. That person also has the same Ananda because that person is not limited by one's own individuality. As long as you are holding on to your individuality, you can only have so much Ananda. But the one who knows oneself as not an individual but the limitless consciousness, which is manifest as both subject and object, for that person, all Ananda is there because that person knows I am the source of all Ananda, all happiness. Because happiness is not any one object. Understand that. If it is an object, everybody will go to market and buy it. Correct? Neither it is a quality of an object. This also you have to understand. You can say, no, no, for me, happiness is nothing but a new car. Okay. If happiness is really a quality of the new car, that new car has to give happiness to everybody. But you are happy, your neighbor is very unhappy. Looking at your new car, he's become envious. Okay. Neighbor's envy, owner's pride. Correct? So happiness is neither a substance which you can buy kg wise, kilograms, nor it is the quality of any substance. The whole world is nothing but substance and qualities, correct? If it is neither, then what is it? The whole objective world is not the source of happiness. That means, then where is this happiness? Means you are the source of all happiness. This can be understood in another way also. Everything else you only love conditionally, correct? See, all the things which you love them only because it invokes a pleased you. Otherwise, you will discard it. You may say, I love you unconditionally, you are the love of my life, and all that, even to your spouse. But even that is not true. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, Upanishad. Correct? Everything is priyam, is pleasing only because it invokes a pleased you. If it does not invoke that, then diverse only. Correct? Even the one who to whom you told you love unconditionally, you now allow. You initially love, then you allow. Like that, my Guruji used to say, you allow them to go. Correct? Why? Because even Upanishad explicitly says, even the wife does not love the husband for the sake of the husband, but only for oneself, for the sake of oneself. The husband does not love the wife for the sake of the wife, but only for the sake of oneself, like that. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati, like that it says finally. Everything, even on Bhagavan, you can become angry. Correct? There are people who did puja for a long time, years and years. Suddenly, some tragedy happened in their life. Then they become angry. They stop the puja and blame Bhagavan. They say, I did all this puja and now you have given me this. I don't believe you know anymore. People can become like that, right? So everything is conditionally loved. The condition being that it has to invoke you, a certain pleasing you. But what about yourself? That is the only thing you unconditionally love, correct? That means whatever you love unconditionally has to be the source of all happiness, correct? Everything else is only conditional. You are the only one whom you love unconditionally. So the source of unconditional love also has to be the source of all happiness. So that's what Upanishad also is pointing out. You are the source of all happiness. There is no other source, external source really for happiness. If you have understood that, then Atmanastu Kamaya Sarvam Priyam Bhavati also you will understand. Then you become what? Atmanyeva Atmana Tushtaha. Gita also beautifully says, one who is happy with himself, by himself, correct? Because you have understood you are the source of all happiness. Whether it is Vishaya Sukha which is born out of sense objects, or Sukha which is more like Vidyananda also, they talk different Anandas. There is a big discussion in Panchadashi also. There is a text written by Vidyaranya. The different Anandas, all of them are nothing but Brahmananda only. Brahman alone is the source of all Ananda, and that Brahman is not separate from you. So here, Vishwashambhuvam, same thing. Narayana, whom we are doing dhyanam, upasana on, is the source of all Ananda. Sham means Sukham, the one who gives Sukham to everybody, one who is the source of all Ananda, Sukha, is Narayana. And Narayana himself is everything. Vishwam, Narayanam Devam, Aksharam Paramam Padam, Paramam Prabhum also there is a reading. Okay. So this Narayana is everything, Vishwam being the Karana of everything. Karana means here material cause, we have to understand. Because normally, always there is an intelligent cause, there is a material cause. The intelligent cause can be different from the effect. Like even the potter is different from the pot. But the pot cannot be different from the clay or gold of which it is made. Correct? The material cause pervades the effect. Like that here, Vishwam, everything is pervaded by this Narayana. Then Narayanam also is there. What is the meaning of this word Narayana? That also is very interesting, correct? Narayanam. So in fact, when I look at this Narayana word, two very famous Mangala shlokas also come to my mind. One is Mahabharata itself. Whenever we read Mahabharata, so the first this shloka we say Narayanam namaskritya naranchaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jaya mudiraye. So Jaya is another name for Mahabharata. So we start the study of Jaya Mahabharata by doing namaskara to whom? Narayanam namaskritya, doing namaskara to Narayana. Naranchaiva narottamam, and also the Nara, who is again Narottama also, one who is the best among human beings, and Narayana. So who are referred to here? See, Mahabharata is the story of Krishna. Understand that, really speaking. The real story of Krishna is there in Mahabharata. If you want to know Krishna, you read Mahabharata. Of course, Bhagavatam also is there. And the Nara there is Arjuna. So Mahabharata itself is the story of Krishna and Arjuna. And Krishna and Arjuna are again looked upon as Narayana and Naranarayana, like that. There is a Avatara also, in fact, we talk about. So Bhagavan Vishnu appeared as Nara and Narayana and did tapas in Badrinath. Correct? Badri Narayana, whom we worship, we go to Badrinath. There, the Naranarayana also are there in the sanctum itself. I don't know whether you have gone and seen. So Nara and Narayana, they were the ones who did tapas there for the welfare of this whole Jagat, let us say. And in fact, there is story and all that Indra got threatened. He thought that they are doing so much tapas because Indra is only a padavi, correct? He has to safeguard his position, his status. So he thought, no, I have to disturb these guys. They are doing too much tapas and they will take over my position, status. So Indra sent all these celestials to disturb this Naranarayana. He sent all the Apsaras, Kamadeva also. They try and come to entice Narayana and disturb their tapas. Then what did Narayana do? Narayana placed a flower on his thighs, it seems. And from there, Urvashi came. Urvashi was so beautiful that all these other Apsaras and all, they became ashamed of themselves, seeing the beauty of Urvashi. And they all retreated. Then Narayana sent Urvashi also to Devaloka, to Indra. So Urvashi, they say that from Uru means thighs. The one who was born out of the thighs of Narayana is Urvashi, really. Like that, there is a story is there. Anyway, Urvashi story also is there. So Narayana is one part of that twin avatars. And Naranarayana only appeared later on as Krishna and Arjuna also. Like that, even in references in Mahabharata are there. So Narayanan Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam. So you do Namaskara to Narayana, you do Namaskara to Narottama, who is Arjuna. Because Bhagavad Gita also is there because of Arjuna and Krishna only, correct? And then Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. So then you do Namaskara to Saraswati Devi, Vyasa Bhagavan, who wrote everything for us. And then only you start Mahabharata. Then another thing is Bhagavad Gita, when Shankara Bhagavad Pada wrote the commentary, he also starts with our Narayana Paro Vyaktat Andam Avyakta Sambhavam Andasyantasthi me lokaha Saptadvipa cha Medini. Like this, interestingly, only few bhashyas Shankaracharya starts with some Mangala shloka. Taittiriya Upanishad also he has written a shloka before the bhashya. Here in Bhagavad Gita, he starts with Narayanaha Paraha Avyaktat Paraha, like that. So Narayana, who is Avyaktat Paraha, even here this Param word is coming, correct? Aksharam Paramam Padam. Okay. Vishwan Narayanam Devam Aksharam Paramam Padam. So one who transcends the Avyakta. Avyakta means the unmanifest, the potential causal form, you can say. So everything is potentially there, correct? The entire banyan tree is potentially there in the seed. That's how it comes up. But Narayana, the Swarupa of Narayana transcends both the cause and effect, the causal form and the effect. So avyaktat paraha, avyakta means unmanifest. Vyakta means manifest. When you see the world, it is Vyakta Jagat. You go to deep sleep, everything is avyakta, everything is resolved. Only potentially it is there. But again you wake up. Because it was potentially there, only you are waking up. Correct? Like that, this entire macro world also, Srishti, Sthiti, Laya. Like that, it is a cycle. We talk about that. So even in Laya, everything is there potentially. It is not manifest. But Narayana is avyaktat paraha. So this Narayana is mentioned as the first word. So Bhashyakara starts the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya with the word Narayana in the Mangala Sloka. Okay, that is all fine. Then what is the meaning of this Narayana? So that is also again in Mahabharata also there is a verse. In Vishnu Purana also there is a verse talking about the meaning of Narayana. And there is also the same verse is there in Manu also. Manu first chapter 10th verse itself is talking about Narayana. So what is that verse? In fact, that verse is quoted here by Sayanacharya also. When Sayanacharya in his Bhashya for this Narayanam word, when he explains that, he is quoting that same verse. What is that verse? Apo narayiti proktaha apo vai narasunavaha ayanam tasyatah purvam tena narayana smritaha. Like this, there is a verse. In fact, there is a slightly different reading of this verse also. Ayanam tasyatah purvam is there, correct? The second part. Meaning wise, it's all the same. Okay, there is a slightly different reading of that, but anyway, apo nara iti proktaha. So apaha means what? Waters. This apa is a plural word. Okay, and this apaha is again a upalakshanam for all the panchabhutas also we can take. Okay, so this waters is called Nara. So how can you say water is Nara, or all the liquids are all Nara? Means that they are trying to explain how this Apaha waters can be called Naraha. Means Nara is a word, correct? Nara means human being, one word is there. It has come from the dhatu Nr. Nr is the dhatu, from there Nara, Naraha. But Nara can be looked upon as Nariyate iti Naraha. Riyate means that Nakshayati, that is the meaning. Because that Ri itself comes from a dhatu called Ring Kshaye. So the Ri is for Kshaya, means Kshaya means that which declines or decays or can get destroyed. But one which is indestructible, indeclinable, unchanging, that is Nara. That also meaning is there. Nara is nothing but this Atma Chaitanyam. Atma Swarupa is Nara. Nariyate iti Naraha. Narasya apatyam. Like that you can see. That which is born out of Nara, the one who is this indestructible Atma, of which these waters are born, it seems. Tasya apatyam means you can put a tadita pratyaya called and there. If you look at it grammatically, or tasya idam also. And can come in different meanings. All this is nothing but which has come from this Naraha. Is all Nara, Naraha. An pratyaya, Tadita pratyaya, when it comes, the first vowel will have vriddhi. That is the rule. Okay. So Nara becomes Nara. So water itself is a product of this Nara. So it is called Nara. Okay. So apaha Nara iti proktaha. And that is the ayanam means what again? Ayanam means sthanam. Again, ayanam, the word ayanam yeti also you can say. Mean ayanam can be understood as knowledge or as sthanam also. There is a gati meaning is there in that. Gati artha. So naraha yasya ayanam narayanam. Correct? That is the meaning. So nara is waters, and one whose sthanam or one who is present in the waters is Narayana, because Narayana is generally presented as one who is in the Kshira Sagara, correct? One who is happily lying in the Sagara. Ananta Shayana, Ananta also is there, Ananta Shesha Naga, the original coiled mattress, my Guruji used to say, is Ananta. And Narayana is there peacefully, not sleeping, understand that. But Narayana need not do anything. Only in the presence of Narayana, everything happens. That is the tattva there. When we show Narayana as just lying down without doing anything, means Narayana's presence is good enough. Narayana need not do anything. Everything is effortless. That is the tattva there. Okay, so the Narayana, one whose abode or sthanam is the waters themselves. From him only the waters came, and one who is also having that as his own sthana. Now this is the sthula meaning, you can say. Physically, if you look at it, these waters first came from Narayana, from Nara, in fact. That's why they are called Nara. And then that Nara himself has as his abode or sthanam the same waters. This also in another way you can understand it as pravesha tat srishtva tadeva nupravishat. This is also there, correct? Having created the waters, then he entered, and that is where he is now available. That's why he is called Narayana. Nara Yasya Ayanam. So this we look at this Sukshma also, this Pravesha Shruti you can understand. That is the Sukshma meaning of that. That means what? The Chaitanyam, from that only everything became manifest, and then it entered and it is now available in your buddhi as awareness, as Chidabhasa. Because the Chaitanyam, that consciousness is manifest in your mind, correct? And it is available there. So the consciousness which is manifest in each and every one of us as the Kshetrajnam, also Bhagavan says in the 13th chapter. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. All the kshetra fields, there is a field of knowledge and there is a knower. But I am the knower in all fields of knowledge. I am the knower. All the knowers which are there in different upadhis, the minds, are all nothing but me alone. There is only one real Kshetrajna. That is Narayana. Correct? So Narayana meaning is what? Nara means apaha. Yasya ayanam. Apaha, the one who is abode or sthanam is that. Or otherwise you can say the one who, the Chaitanyam which is manifest and one who entered into that. Correct? The Nara is Prakritehe Patihi, the one who is the Pati of the Prakriti itself. Okay? And and one who has entered after the Srishti, so that he is available to be known. That is Narayana. So we'll continue this next week. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
धन्यवाद
धन्यवादः गुरुजी,
धन्यवाद गुरुजी।
धन्यवाद गुरुजी।
धन्यवाद गुरुजी।
धन्यवाद गुरुजी।
धन्यवाद गुरुजी।